Hey there, Saints. Pastor Dave here with another weekly devotional for you this Wednesday, this first week after Easter, after Resurrection Sunday. I want to share this devotional from Sarah Arthur's 1 Year Daily Grind, and this is about the power of a good story. While I was in college, I volunteered with an inner city ministry for children in the housing projects on the south side of Chicago. Every spring we had an Easter banquet, and the kids would get all dressed up and behave like saints for 5 minutes or so. This particular year, I had a little girl named Kiki on my lap. She looked so cute in her Sunday best and was acting prim and proper for once. I knew my time was limited, so while I had her attention, I said, "Kiki, do you know why we're having this party? Have you ever heard the Easter story?" She shook her head. So I said, "There once was a man named Jesus," and went ahead and told what happened to him in words she could understand. The whole time I was speaking, Kiki was perfectly still, a child enchanted. It was as if I were weaving a magic spell, reciting a string of words that had the power to change the fate of mortals. And when I was done, there was a pause, and then she said, "Tell it again." So I did. And when I was done telling it a second time, she pointed to her friend who was sitting near us, and I said, "Tell her." So I said, "You help me tell her." And together we shared the Easter story. It's so easy for those of us who've heard the story all our lives to forget the power of that tale, how it grips the imagination like a spell of enchantment. Did you know that's where the word gospel comes from? From the Old English for good spell or good story. The story of Jesus is indeed the good spell, the good magic, the best kind of enchantment that can transform lives. How could we ever forget? Saints, do you remember the first time you ever heard the Easter story? If you're like me, maybe you don't. I grew up in the church, and I can't put my finger on the first time that I heard it. I can't remember the first Easter service that I went to. I know it must have been when I was 3 or 4, sometime back before I can really remember my own life. But it seems like that's just always been a story that I knew. I do remember the first time that it sunk in. I remember the first time that I heard that story and it really hit me. And that was when I was in high school, when I was a teenage member of my youth group, and our youth pastor, Jim, took the group of high school boys out. It must have been Thursday or Friday of Holy Week, took us out on the side of the church where we had a columbarium and a cross set up in that columbarium, and he told us this story about a man who had been kind of kidnapped and beaten and dragged to a courtroom and put on trial for these false charges and then sentenced to death and put up on a cross. And the way he told it, as if it were happening in the modern day, as if it were an anonymous person this was happening to, we didn't realize that this was the story of Easter. We didn't realize this was about Jesus until we got to the cross. And at that point, I recognized that this story wasn't just a story. This was my faith story. But it hit me in a way that it never had before. And it was a real story. It was about a real person, not just a Bible story that I had heard all my life. It was something that actually happened, and it was something that actually made a difference, and I had an emotional response to it for the first time. I don't know, again, when was the first time you heard the Easter story? I don't know if perhaps there was a time when it did suddenly become real to you like that, but I know that for a lot of us, it's something that we've heard so often, like Sarah points out, that we have lost sight of the power of it. We just don't feel anything about it because we know it. We know it through and through. There's nothing surprising about it. There's nothing new about it. There's just nothing really moving about it anymore. I wonder, Saints, if maybe you need to tell that story to someone who hasn't heard it. Maybe if you could share that story with someone for whom it is new, maybe that would help. Or if not help you, at least it would help them. Because this is the foundation of our faith, this story of Jesus' death and resurrection. And if it is losing its power in our lives, well, that's something that we should want to do something about, isn't it? Saints, that's your devotional for this week. Hope it's helpful, hope it's worth thinking about, and I hope that you are doing well. I hope you're staying healthy, and I'll be praying for you. I hope you'll keep praying for me. I will see you again soon. Y'all take care.